Hi, my name is Dan Perche, and I am the program director for the Chiara Center, a place of Franciscan spirituality. We welcome people of all faiths for prayer, reflection, retreats, and conferences. We're part of the beautiful grounds of the Hospital Sisters of St. Francis Convent in Springfield, Illinois. And I'd like to offer a presentation today called Entering into the San Damiano Cross, a very important image for all Franciscans. And I would like this to be not so much about just the details, but one of encountering reflection that flows from this image, and then praxis, which is a Latin word for practical application and conduct, how we're to be as a result of what we're going to see. I'm going to be referencing from this book, Francis and the San Damiano Cross by Susan St. Cyng. It's a wonderful little book with reflections and details. Right off the bat, Francis fell in love with not the crucifixion of Christ that he depicted, but the love embodied in the crucifixion. Francis, you have to understand, was a poet, and he staged plays when he wasn't partying and drinking with his friends in his early years of revelry. And he lived the life of the age to be a courtier, to be well esteemed, to be a great knight. He went off to fight the Perugians nearby and was captured quickly because he's a poet and he staged plays, not a good soldier. And Francis was in prison for a year until his father, Pietro Bernardone, a rising merchant, could ransom him out. But Francis came back to change soul, perhaps even with post-traumatic stress. He was lost. He was a person, again, of revelry, of fighting with the people of his town. Now he's lost, and so he goes down from the town of Assisi into the valley, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. Just another reflection. Francis saw this crucifix as a play of sorts, with players and parts. His prayer became, what will be ours to be and do? The San Damiano Cross asks us, as it did Francis, to become part of the mystery of transformation and to grasp the mystery that is greater than ourselves. I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to show you a PowerPoint that I've created for this. So, in order to know about the cross, you have to understand the little wayside chapel of San Damiano, Saint Damian. There were Syrian monks from the East who brought with them Byzantine spirituality and art. This was supposedly a Benedictine chapel, but it was in great disrepair. This is a rather romantic image of the San Damiano Church for the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon by Franco Zeffirelli from the 70s. It's a beautiful movie about St. Francis. And there's Francis on the left. He's running to it because, remember, he was up in the high places with the wealthy, and he is now coming down low. A very important journey, a pilgrimage. And he encounters the cross within this space. And I'd like to begin with the actual prayer that he prayed, that he developed when he was in front of that image. Most high and glorious God, bring light into the darkness of my heart. Give me right faith, certain hope, and perfect charity. Lord, give me insight and wisdom, so I might always discern your holy and true will. It's a setting by John Michael Talbot. So San Damiano, the story is that Francis, kind of a lost soul now, wanders down to the valley, and he sees that church, and he hears, in that prayer moment with the cross, he hears those epic words, Francis, my church is in ruins, for as you see, I need you to rebuild my church. Francis has a new summons. He's filled with new life, And as Franciscan spirituality likes to celebrate, we start with the particular. Start with the small, work your way big. So on the left, I'm going to use my cursor here as the original image of this little church of San Damiano that Francis rebuilt. Those stones he purchased, thanks to his dad's cloth business. Francis took parts of the clothing merchandise and sold it on the sly in the neighboring village of Foligno. His dad found out about this and was looking for Francis, and Francis would kind of hang out in near this church, and the kindly priest would welcome him. And when Francis started bringing him money, the priest was a little nervous because he remembered Francis as the party guy, reveling with his family and friends. And he also knew Pietro Bernardone to be somewhat of a mercurial figure, so he was not interested in taking that money. Upon leaving, Francis threw it back through a little hole in the wall, said, "Here you go," and they became friends, and perhaps a father figure that Francis really needed. On the right is the interior, the original section where they prayed, and you'll see an image of the San Damiano cross, not the original, because now the original has been brought to the Basilica Church of Saint Clare, Saint Chiara in Assisi. So here we are. This is the San Damiano cross. Actually, it's a crucifix because it contains the body of Jesus, and but I'll use a cross just for expediency. First of all, the shape. There's a lot of influence here. It's a Romanesque influence with the shape of a church. Actually, it's pretty much the shape of our church here at the convent. Down below, the pews here, the side chapels, and our church ends with the round at the top, but the shape of a church. Umbrian influence and Byzantine. This is an icon. This is really important because icons are meant to transport us into a spiritual place that is going to teach us, form us, almost as if it's a direct means to divine understanding as best as we can. The cross itself represents an action of great violence. The blood of Jesus is pouring. Francis was living in a time of war, poverty, political strife, pandemics. Sound like today. And in fact, this is meant to be today. An icon transports us into the past, but it's also into the future and present. It's timeless portal for transformation. Francis's response upon looking at this image to all the violence, abject poverty, and amidst the opulence of churches and the growing wealth of the area was one of humility. To rebuild the church was to start small, but then to build the people of God. He understood this as a very horizontal, a communal, a grassroots kind of effort, one that was very inclusive of all peoples who had been discounted. The cross that was hanging in that chapel was not far from the leper colony. In fact, the story of the lepers is that Francis saw them as so essential to being a Franciscan that he said brothers will avail themselves to the lepers almost as if they are the formation directors. And a beautiful phrase is that they made mercy together. So interdependent were the Franciscan followers and the lepers in that area around San Damiano. With the icon, there's an otherworldliness that we're going to see. We're going to see angels praising God in the resurrection and the ascension at the top. We're going to see the suffering on the horizontal plane, the people at the cross, bystanders. Some even look as if they're having happy conversations. This is an image of the life, the death, and the resurrection happening at the same time. Again, this is timeless, this icon. Before we look at all the details, I want to just focus on the colors and some of the symbols. This is surrounded with gold. Gold is a color of royalty. It's a regal quality of great dignity, wealth, treasure. Within are the red lines and lots of red, not just blood, but life, new life. and then black is the color of death. In fact, Jesus spans the arms in front of the tomb. He is standing on death, and the circle at the very top, still has a foot on death, but he is emerging into new life. Some other symbolism on the right, you're going to note that the entire cross is surrounded by these shells. This is very symbolic because San Damiano Chapel was a place for people to stop along their pilgrimage and to reflect, maybe receive some sustenance, I don't know. But the shell is worn by the pilgrim. Saint Peregrino is the great patron saint of the pilgrim, and that word peregrino is from the Latin peregrinus, which actually means one from abroad. So notice that the entire crucifix is surrounded as if this is a pilgrimage for a lifetime. Also, on the left and on the right side, I'm circling the rooster. In Umbrian art, there's plenty of birds, but the rooster has a couple of meanings. Of course, Peter denying Jesus 3 times, the cock crowed. At the same time, the rooster is the sentinel of the breaking in of the new day. This is a new day coming with the life, death, and resurrection of the Christ. So yes, here is the body of Jesus. And what you're going to notice is that it's as if he's standing. This is not the traditional image of the slumped, painful Christ with the clenched hands. It's almost as if he's even lifted off the cross while being on it. Again, lots of dueling realities that are all being brought into one. Jesus is standing erect. Notice that he is wearing a garment. This is actually a garment for the high priest. It's a garment inlaid with golden hems and golden rope to indicate that this is the high priest. And notice his arms. He is offering the great prayer from the cross as high priest. Those are arms of welcome. He's presenting himself. It's as if he's summoning and presenting at the same time. Let's go more in detail. The face of Jesus. Here's the compassionate face of the Christ that captivated both Francis and Clare. Notice Jesus's eyes are wide open, as if contemplating the mystery of God who is now beholding him, the Son, on the cross. While his eyes are large and seeing all, his mouth is small, diminutive, closed, as if indicating there's little to be said. He's speaking. It's like the great Franciscan saying attributed to Francis, preach at all times, and if necessary, use words. This is a time to preach. Jesus is preaching by seeing and beholding. Notice there's no crown of thorns. Instead, there's this amazing full halo that you can even see the line going underneath Jesus's chin and neck. The whole circle is complete because Jesus is the fullness of deity incarnated into the human. Even on instead of the crown of thorns is the cross in the background. There's, again, decoration was the way for the Byzantines to draw honor and attention to the figure being cited. I don't quite know what the figure of the hair, the 3 locks on each side. Lots of people like to speculate, and on this one I won't, but there's a synchronicity happening here in the image. I will draw your attention to the forehead. There is on the forehead, a brow, it's as if the third eye, the eye of knowledge, inner knowledge, is present. This is what makes this a multivalent, an image with many meanings, not just for Christianity, but for other spiritual traditions about the inner seeing, the inner knowledge, the knowledge of God, of the mysteries that are happening in horrific fashion, but yet with glorious results. As Franciscans, we like to see there's the tau image on the forehead, the brow, and going down into the nose. The tau is the smallest letter of the Greek of the Hebrew alphabet, and it's a beloved symbol of Francis. It's also an image of the cross. Francis heard this preaching by the Pope, in the cathedral when he was a young man. And the Pope said from Ezekiel chapter 9, verse 4, "Go throughout the city of Jerusalem and put the mark on the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over the detestable things that are being done." Francis even signed his papers with the tau. So it's as if the tau is imprinted upon the face of Christ. At this point, I want to step away from the cross itself and talk about Clare, Lady Clare, who heard the preaching of Francis and who Francis listened to and welcomed Clare to join them, but giving San Damiano and to the women who were joining. And Clare as the mother. She didn't want to be called abbess. She was the mother of these women, forming a new way of being. And Clare, in accordance with the times, obeyed the strictures of enclosure. That meant women were to be enclosed in the convent, and it sounds very similar to those of us who are sheltering in place during the pandemic. But rather than be diminished by it and shrinking and becoming angry, Clare and her sisters developed this powerful spirituality that is exploding out like a 6,000 watt lamp in a dark space. And so let's move over to Clare. We had a local artist, Felicia Olin, who painted this image as a commission for Chiara Center. Clare has the same large eyes and the same brow, if you will, as the image, same golden halo, not complete, but the diminutive mouth, because her preaching was by this form of spirituality. I'm going to just break away and talk a little bit about. The spirituality of St. Clare began with gazing. So remember, these women are in the San Damiano convent looking at this. By the way, this piece is almost 7 feet tall, 4.5 feet wide, about 5 inches thick. This is a massive piece of wood with the cloth that's been painted and glued. This is a very prominent image. So she gazes upon it as if it's a mirror. It's revealing truth back to her. And she is living into the stillness of the convent, not so much doing, just being in the face of Christ. The second word is to consider. That part of the word sidera, as opposed to stella, meaning a star, I see a star. Sidera is to see all the stars. To consider is to have the wide view, like a camera that's aperture has been kind of closed tight in a small space to see wide. Clare considers all that she's gazing, and then she contemplates it. She takes it in as an interior reflection, mulling. What does this mean? Who am I to you, O God, and who are you to me? Who am I to these? Who are we to be in this world? How are you in this world? So she's reckoning, she's reflecting. And finally, there's action. They were not just people that thought and prayed, they had to act. And there were times Clare was known to sneak out of the convent with her sisters, making rules that they should go and be with the people as Francis was. By the way, in this image, Clare is holding a rule that she wrote, the first woman of all Christendom to have a rule submitted and received by the Holy Church. So over 4 papacies and 40 years, Clare toughed it out. She's another story, but she spent a lot of time with the cross. Let's go back to the image. This is the very top. And the 3 circles, again, there's the halo of the face of Christ, and then going up is this next circle where this Christ image is, and then there's the very top. At the top is the hand of God the Father, as if saying, "Behold my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased. Do what he asks." The 2 fingers are as if to acknowledge the Son, the second person of the Trinity, while the thumb and the other fingers are the 3 members of the Trinity. This is a very much of a God image, blessing and approving. The Christ in this part of the cross is triumphant. This is a man of action, ascendancy. He's got his left foot on the circle of death. He's rising into new life. Even his cloth is moving as if there's a pneumatic, a spirit quality. This is a drama unfolding as he holds the great staff of victory. And his halo this time is surrounded with the red, again, the triumph into new life. And notice the angels. In this image, they're celebratory. They're gesturing towards all the open hands. Most all the images are gesturing towards the Christ. I want to differentiate in Laverna, which is a mountain getaway place for the Franciscans at the time. There's a great cross that's been created where on each side of the suffering Christ is the sun and the moon. And each one face is full of horror and anger and rage, and the other one is full of sorrow and weeping. And all the babies in that image are like cherubs, like babies cooing in their crib. And it seems so strange. It's like, don't they realize what's happening? But there's a timelessness, like this is all part of an unfolding plan. And these angels here are aware of the fullness of the plan. That inner eye that Christ has is what they know and what they see taking place. The triumphant Christ and the celebratory angels. The arms of Jesus and the attending angels are back to that plane where the drama is unfolding in real time. And again, you'll notice the blood as it goes from the hands is moving down and upon. Very much what Francis did when he moved down from Assisi. He wanted to have that life blood that flowing into where the people are. And this image is that of the Exodus story where the blood covers the doorposts from the angel that is going around and killing those without the image of the blood on their doorposts. And also, as Christians, we pray that the blood of Christ would be upon us, to cover us, to protect us. The beholding angels and the hands. Again, a very open presenting image. Now we're here in the center of the cross, and we have on Jesus's right, the right side is the privileged side. There's the wound, open wound of Christ flowing upon John, the beloved disciple, who is present at the scene with Mary, the mother of Jesus. And they're placed together as they were in the Gospels. Mary's hand is gestured to her son just as she did in the Feast of Cana, when she said, do whatever he says. And it's as if they're having a conversation. There's a sense of abiding with the Christ. The robes that they're wearing are full of luxurious royal colors, indicating dignity, wisdom. On the other side, we have Mary of Magdala, Mary, the mother of James or Clopas. And then we have the centurion. The Roman centurion had 100 soldiers, a very important figure. And he, if you'll notice his hand, the same as the one of God the Father, is giving the two fingers as this second person. This was the Son of God. So he's testifying. You'll notice that Mary and John and the other two Marys are given halos. The centurion is not. He's not yet part of recognized. He's just now recognizing, but he's not part of the family in a sense. I want to point out this little guy here to the right. I did a close-up of his face. We don't know who he is. A lot of people speculate, and this could be the artist. It could be just a sign of those who are coming after. You'll notice the circles that are going beyond the head of those who are coming. I'd like to think that's us, that we have a scene. Maybe Francis saw himself, the little person. He was known as the little man of Assisi. So, interesting little figure here. Just before I go, I want to talk about just some of the images, the bookends. We have John over here, and then we have Mary, Magdala on the other side. John, of course, is one of the great apostles. Mary has been given the title apostle to the apostles because she is the first one to recognize Jesus has risen and announces that, as apostles do, with great courage to others, and has a very dignified place early on in the early church. There's two small figures. We have on the left, we have Longinus, the soldier who used his spear to pierce Christ's side. And on the other end is Stephanos. It's kind of a crude Greek derivative for the word sponge. He's the one that lifts the sponge as an act of mercy for Christ who thirsts. They're diminutive characters compared to the others. You'll see that in Byzantine art. But it's an interesting reflection to think that these are two responses to suffering, even in our age. One response is to pierce the side of the suffering one who is already dying and is dead. The other one is mercy, giving a drink to the thirsty. And so that's a question we have to answer today as we encounter suffering. Finally, we have the bottom of the cross, Jesus' feet standing in death. The blood of new life is pouring out. And we have these figures. We don't know who these figures are. They have halos. So again, they're just some of the elect that are part of the scene. And the rest, supposedly there are 3 others, but it's hard to tell. I can't. That are said to be there. What happens is that people would go into these shrines and pilgrimage, and they would touch the bottom, and then they would bless themselves with the sign of the cross. Much like in Springfield, Illinois, where people go to Lincoln's tomb and they rub his nose. And so his nose has been rubbed so many times that it's shiny bronze. In fact, there had to be a nose graft because so many people wore off the metal. It's hard to believe that, but that's what happened to this image here of the cross. And finally, at the very bottom is a slab of stone, an image of rock solid truth, the bedrock. The bulwark of the faith is the church that holds this story up for the ages. Again, Francis lived into this image. It informed him as a theatrical soul. He saw each player playing a part, and he saw himself within this image. And so that's how we'll finish. Before he died, he said these words: "I have done what was mine to do. May Christ teach you what you are to do." Saying, don't just be another me. Be the fullness of you. Be the flavor of you in the world as you have been created. Now on the right is Francis. Francis was a joyful soul. Formerly the beautiful peacock of a party guy in his finery. Now he wears the rags of a beggar. And in a moment of exaltation, he picks up 2 twigs and plays them kind of like we do when we play air guitar or something to a song that we really love. So full of joy was he. Francis wore the cords of a beggar because rich people had money belts. He had nothing. He wanted people to know he had nothing. He was very small, a small figure. And so the question is, when we look at this image now, as we gaze upon it, who are we to be? Who are we to be in this world? May we be imprinted by the cross, by the image upon it. So that's the presentation. I thank you so much for attending. I hope that someday maybe you'll go to Assisi and go into the chapel and see the beautiful image as it really is, and celebrate how life, death, and resurrection is playing out in your own life, in the life of the world. It's going to be okay. Things are as they should be, where we should be, and we're ascending and being transformed in the icon of the Christ. May God bless you and give you peace.